In the video on subtools, we used a feature briefly called Mirror and Weld to mirror one eyeball on the x-axis over to the other side so that we had one on each side of our symmetry. Let's talk a little bit about Mirror and Weld and how this function works inside of ZBrush. So I've dragged out a sphere onto my canvas and gone into edit mode and then made it into a polymesh 3D so that we have polyframes here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on the floor grid by hitting Shift P. Now we can see our floor grid here, and at the center of it we can see a couple of colored lines, one blue and one red. There's actually a green line underneath here as well. Let's move this sphere out of the way really quick so that we can talk about these indicator lines. So what I'm going to do is go over to my Move gizmo and just slide this over. Now we can see these lines much easier. So the green line in here is denoting our y-axis. The blue line is denoting our z-axis, and the red line is going to be our x-axis. Each one of these lines represents the negative side of its axis. Our negative x-axis is going along this red line. The opposite side of that would be our positive x-axis. The forward z line here is our negative z-axis, and going back into space would be our positive z-axis. And the green line going up is our negative y-axis, and down would be our positive y-axis. ZBrush mirrors from the negative side to the positive side in general, depending on what you're doing. Information that's on the negative side then will be mirrored over to the positive side when we use Mirror and Weld. So right now I've got this sphere sitting on the negative side of our x-axis. Let's put this sphere back to world center. And under our geometry palette here, there's a sub-palette called Position. Here we can adjust the positive and negative positions of this sphere as well. If I take my X position and I bring this to the negative, you'll see that it starts to move over to the left. If I take the Y slider and I drop that into the negative, it's going to rise up along the negative Y-axis. Now, when I moved the view, the floor snapped to the bottom of my object. This is a feature inside of ZBrush where we'll see both the world axis and the axis on the floor plane. If we want the floor to stay at world center, all we have to do is go up to the Draw menu, down to Elevation, and change this from -1, which will follow our object, and change this to 0. Now this will always keep the floor at world center. So I can move this up or down, and it's not going to affect where my floor plane ends up. Now from here what I can do is use Mirror and Weld. If I go to Modify Topology, Mirror and Weld is right here. And you can see that there are 3 small letters, X, Y, and Z, on the upper right-hand corner of this button. Each letter that is lit is an active axis. So if I turn off Y and Z and we just have X highlighted, when we click this button, it's only going to mirror on the X-axis. So we can click that, and now we've mirrored the sphere over to the positive X side. If I undo that and we turn on Y and turn off X, right now my sphere is located on the negative Y-axis. So if I click on this, it's going to mirror on the Y-axis. Same thing would go for Z, though we don't have this on right now for Z. We could always go to Position, pull this over to the negative, go to Modify Topology, activate Z, turn off Y for now, and click Mirror and Weld. And now we are mirrored both in the Y and the Z. If I turn this off, turn on X, and click Mirror and Weld, now we're mirrored on all 3 axes for this sphere. So where does the weld part come in? Well, if we start off with our sphere sitting at world center, and we go to our gizmo and move it over so that part of the sphere is still extending past the X symmetry line. And then we go to mirror and weld and click this with the X highlighted. What ZBrush has done now is it's mirrored whatever's on the active or negative X side over to the positive X side. And then it's welded these pieces together so that it's still a single watertight mesh. Let's go back and undo that now and go back to world center here. And let's move this over to the inactive or the positive X side and have some of this still extending into our negative X side. And then let's go to mirror and weld and click mirror and weld. And again, whatever was on the negative X side or the active X side has been mirrored over to the positive X side and welded together. Now, if I move the entire sphere so that no part of it is extending into the negative X side, and I click mirror and weld, what we would expect to happen is for the sphere to disappear. However, what ZBrush does, if there's no mesh information on the opposite side, ZBrush will simply mirror the side that has information over to the opposite side, regardless of whether or not it's on the active axis or not. This only works if there's no information on the negative side. Another really important use for mirror and weld is to get symmetry back on your model. This can become necessary if you've turned off symmetry at some point and forgotten, and you've gone through and sculpted on your model, assuming that you had symmetry on, and then you rotate to find that all that work that you just did isn't on the opposite side. You can simply use mirror and weld to reapply the symmetry to the model. What if our information's not on the proper side for mirror and weld though? So here I've put the detail over on the opposite side. If I go over to mirror and weld now, what's going to happen is the active X side over here, where there is none of the new sculptural information, is going to overwrite our sculpted detail. So if I click this, we lose all of that work. I'm going to undo that. In order to get this to work properly, we have to mirror this side over to the active X side, and you do that by going down to the deformation palette here. And the second button under the deformation palette is called mirror. If we do that, now our details have been flipped or mirrored over to the other side. Then we can go back to geometry and click mirror and weld, and we get our symmetry back with all of the details that we've sculpted on both sides.